You missed a spot." The words cut through the marble lobby like a blade, dripping with the kind of contempt that comes from years of practiced superiority. Richard Holloway stood there in his $1,000 suit, pointing at an imaginary smudge on the pristine floor, his pale finger jabbing the air with theatrical disgust. "And while you're at it, the restrooms on the 3rd floor need attention too." Amelia Washington looked up from where she knelt beside her cleaning cart, her dark eyes meeting his with a calmness that seemed to infuriate him further. She was dressed in the crisp navy uniform of Sterling Industries executive staff, not the gray coveralls of the cleaning crew, but Holloway either didn't notice or didn't care. In his world, the color of her skin was uniform enough. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding," Amelia said, rising to her full height. At 5'8", she was nearly eye level with the regional manager who had terrorized this building's staff for the past 6 months. "I'm not part of the cleaning crew." Holloway's face flushed red, the kind of crimson that spreads from neck to scalp when someone's authority is questioned. "Don't you dare talk back to me. I've been watching you wander these halls for 20 minutes, and I know what you're doing here. Now get back to work before I have security escort you out." What Holloway didn't know what he couldn't have known because he'd never bothered to look beyond his own prejudices was that Amelia had been wandering these halls because she owned them. Every marble tile, every piece of art, every window that overlooked the city belonged to her. She had built Sterling Industries from a small consulting firm into a multi-billion-dollar empire, and today was supposed to be her surprise visit to the Chicago branch, where reports of workplace harassment had been escalating for months. The twist that would soon shatter, Holloway's world was currently hidden beneath the executive badge clipped to Amelia's jacket, concealed by the folder she carried. But as she watched him gesture imperiously toward the cleaning supplies, she realized this moment would reveal more about her company's culture than any report ever could. "I understand you're the regional manager here," Amelia said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. "Richard Holloway, isn't it?" His eyes narrowed. "That's Mr. Holloway to you. And yes, I run this entire operation, which means when I tell you to clean something, you clean it." Around them, other employees had begun to notice the confrontation. Some pretended to study their phones, others whispered behind hands, but all of them were watching. Amelia could see the fear in their faces, the same fear that had prompted the anonymous complaints that brought her here. This was the man who had created a toxic environment where people were afraid to speak up, where dignity was a luxury reserved for those who looked like him. "Mr. Holloway," she continued, "I'd like to discuss the cleaning protocols with you. But first, I'm curious about your management style. How do you typically handle situations where there might be ... miscommunication?" He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the marble walls. "Miscommunication? The only miscommunication here is you thinking you can waste my time with questions. I've got a business to run, and I don't have time for..." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her dismissively. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but I can have you fired with one phone call. Is that what you want?" The irony was almost to perfect. In 47 years of building her company, Amelia had never encountered such blatant disrespect from one of her own employees. She had faced down hostile takeovers, navigated recessions, and broken through glass ceilings that most people couldn't even see. But here, in her own building, she was being treated like she was invisible. "Actually," she said, reaching for her badge, "I think there's something you should know about who's really in charge here." But before she could reveal the truth, Holloway's assistant appeared at his elbow, a nervous young man named Kevin, who had been watching the exchange with growing horror. He had recognized Amelia the moment she walked in, had tried to catch his boss's attention, but Holloway had been too focused on his power play to notice the frantic signals. "Mr. Holloway," Kevin whispered urgently, "you need to, not now." "Kevin," Holloway snapped, never taking his eyes off Amelia, "can't you see I'm dealing with a situation here?" The situation was about to become much bigger than he imagined. In the next few minutes, Amelia would make a decision that would not only expose Holloway's true nature, but also force her to confront the systemic problems that had taken root in her own company. The badge hidden beneath her folder would soon become the catalyst for a reckoning that would change everything, not just for Holloway, but for every employee who had ever been made to feel less than human in their own workplace. As she prepared to reveal her identity, Amelia couldn't help but think about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a young woman fighting for respect in male-dominated boardrooms to a CEO, discovering that success hadn't insulated her from the very prejudices she thought she'd left behind. The confrontation with Holloway was more than just a case of mistaken identity. It was a mirror reflecting the ugly truth about power, privilege, and the assumptions people make when they think no one important is watching. The lobby had fallen silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant ping of elevator bells. Amelia could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, employees who had gathered at the periphery of the confrontation, some pretending to wait for elevators, others lingering by the reception desk. They had all seen this before. Theatrical displays of authority, his need to put people in what he considered their place. "You know what?" Holloway said, his voice rising to ensure everyone could hear. "I think I've been too generous with you people, too lenient. Maybe it's time for a reminder about how things work around here." He pulled out his phone with exaggerated slowness, holding it up like a weapon. "Security, this is Richard Holloway. I need someone in the main lobby immediately. We have a situation with one of the cleaning staff who's refusing to do her job." And getting belligerent with management, Amelia watched him make the call, her expression unchanged. She had seen this type of performance before, the public humiliation designed to send a message to everyone watching. It was a classic intimidation tactic, one that relied on the assumption that she had no power, no recourse, no way to fight back. "While we're waiting," she said calmly, "perhaps you could explain to me exactly what your role is here at Sterling Industries." Holloway's face twisted with irritation. "My role? I'm the regional manager. I oversee operations for the entire Midwest division. I manage a staff of over 300 people and generate revenue." He stopped, apparently realizing he was justifying himself to someone he considered beneath him. "Why am I even explaining this to you?" "Because," Amelia said, "I'm very interested in understanding how you've managed to create such a unique workplace culture." Around them, she could see employees exchanging glances. Some looked confused, others appeared to be fighting back smiles. Kevin, Holloway's assistant, was practically vibrating with anxiety, clearly torn between loyalty to his boss and the growing realization that this situation was about to explode. Workplace culture. Holloway laughed again, but there was less confidence in it now. Something about Amelia's demeanor was beginning to unnerve him. "The culture here is simple. Everyone does their job, follows the chain of command, and respects authority. That's how we maintain order." "And how do you define respect, Mr. Holloway?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Holloway's face was getting redder, the veins in his neck standing out against his collar. "Respect is not questioning your superiors. Respect is doing what you're told, without attitude. Respect is understanding your place in the hierarchy." "See," Amelia nodded thoughtfully. "And where exactly do you think I fit in this hierarchy?" "At the bottom," he said, without hesitation, "where you belong." The words landed like a physical blow, not just to Amelia, but to everyone within earshot. Several employees gasped audibly. A young woman near the reception desk covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. Even Kevin took a step back, as if trying to distance himself from what his boss had just said. But Amelia didn't flinch. She had heard worse, had faced down men who made Holloway look like an amateur. "That's interesting," she said, "because I've been wondering how someone with your management philosophy came to hold such a position of responsibility. What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Amelia said, her voice carrying a subtle edge now, "that I've been receiving some very troubling reports about this office. Reports about harassment, discrimination, and a toxic work environment that seems to start at the top." Holloway's eyes narrowed. "Who have you been talking to? Because if any of my employees have been spreading lies..." "Lies," Amelia interrupted. "So you're saying there's no truth to the allegations that you've been creating a hostile work environment? That you haven't been making inappropriate comments about employees' appearances, their backgrounds, their qualifications?" I don't know what you're talking about, Holloway said, but his voice had lost some of its bravado. And I don't have to justify my management style to someone like me, Amelia finished. Someone who you've decided doesn't belong here. Someone who you've assumed is only good for cleaning up after your messes. The security guard arrived at that moment, a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform who looked deeply uncomfortable about the situation. Mr. Holloway, you called about a disturbance. Yes, Holloway said, gesturing toward Amelia. This woman is refusing to do her job and causing a scene. I need her removed from the premises immediately. The guard looked at Amelia, then back at Holloway, clearly confused. Sir, I think there might be some mistake. This woman isn't. There's no mistake, Holloway snapped. Are you going to do your job or not? The guard hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, Amelia made her decision. She had seen enough, heard enough, learned everything she needed to know about the man who had been terrorizing her employees for months. It was time to end this charade. Actually, she said, reaching into her folder, I think it's time we cleared up this misunderstanding once and for all. The badge caught the light as Amelia lifted it from her folder, the sterling silver gleaming against the dark fabric of her jacket. For a moment, the engraved letters seemed to dance in the lobby's bright illumination. Amelia Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Sterling Industries. The silence that followed was deafening. Holloway's face went through a series of transformations: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a dawning horror that seemed to drain the color from his skin. The security guard's eyes widened, and he immediately stepped back, his posture shifting from casual authority to rigid attention. Oh my God, someone whispered from the crowd of employees. That's the CEO. I don't believe it, Holloway stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. That's impossible. You can't be. Amelia Washington, she said, clipping the badge to her jacket where everyone could see it. I built this company from the ground up, and I own every square foot of this building, including the floor you just demanded I clean. The transformation in the lobby was instant and dramatic. Employees who had been watching from the sidelines now moved closer, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe, vindication, and barely contained excitement. Kevin, the assistant, looked like he might faint. The security guard was now standing, at attention, clearly mortified by the position he'd been put in, but it was Holloway's reaction that drew everyone's attention. The powerful regional manager who had commanded the room just moments before now stood slack-jawed, his phone still clutched in his hand, his face cycling through shades of red and white as the full implications of what had just happened began to sink in. Ms. Washington, he began, his voice cracking slightly, I had no idea. If I had known, if you had known, what? Amelia asked, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had made her one of the most respected CEOs in the country. You had known who I was, you would have treated me with respect. But it was perfectly acceptable to humiliate someone you thought was a member of the cleaning staff. No, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Mr. Holloway? She took a step closer, and he instinctively backed away. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you believe respect is something that should be rationed based on your perception of someone's worth. The crowd around them had grown larger, and Amelia could see employees pulling out their phones, recording what was quickly becoming a legendary moment in Sterling Industries history. She didn't stop them. In fact, she wanted this moment documented. She wanted every employee in every branch of her company to see what happened when someone forgot that dignity and respect were rights, not privileges. I was trying to maintain order, Holloway said weakly. I thought, I mean, I didn't realize, You didn't realize what? That I was a human being deserving of basic courtesy. That I had the right to be treated with dignity regardless of what job you thought I held? This is all a misunderstanding, Holloway said, his voice gaining a note of desperation. I can explain. Please do, Amelia said. I'm very interested in your explanation. Start with why you felt comfortable speaking to another human being the way you just spoke to me. Holloway opened his mouth, then closed it, apparently realizing that any explanation would only make things worse. Around them, employees were exchanging glances. some nodding in recognition of moments when they had witnessed or experienced similar treatment from their regional manager. "You know what the really tragic part is?" Amelia continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the lobby. "I didn't come here looking for a confrontation. I came here because I'd received reports about problems in this office, reports about a manager who had created a toxic work environment, who treated employees with disrespect, who seemed to believe that his position gave him the right to demean others." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I came here hoping those reports were exaggerated. I came here hoping I would find a leader who understood that our company's success depends on treating every employee with dignity and respect, Ms. Washington." "Please," Holloway said, his voice now openly pleading. "I can change. I can do better." "This isn't who I really am, isn't it?" Amelia asked. "Because from what I've seen today, this is exactly who you are. This is who you are when you think no one important is watching. This is who you are when you believe there will be no consequences for your actions." She turned to address the crowd of employees directly. "How many of you have experienced this kind of treatment from Mr. Holloway? How many of you have been made to feel small, insignificant, or unwelcome in your own workplace?" Several hands went up immediately, then more, until nearly half the people in the lobby were raising their hands. The sight was both heartbreaking and infuriating, and Amelia felt a surge of anger at herself for not addressing this situation sooner. "I want to apologize to each and every one of you," she said, her voice carrying across the silent lobby. "I built this company on the principle that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. I failed you by allowing this situation to continue for so long." She turned back to Holloway, who was now visibly shaking. "As for you, Mr. Holloway, I think we need to have a very serious conversation about your future with this company." The executive conference room on the 32nd floor had floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. But Richard Holloway wasn't looking at the skyline. He sat hunched in his chair, his $1,000 suit wrinkled and his face pale, while Amelia Washington sat across from him with the composure of someone who had built an empire through decisive action and unwavering principles. Between them, on the polished conference table, lay a thick folder containing months of documentation, complaint letters, witness statements, and HR reports that painted a picture of systematic harassment and discrimination. Amelia had spent the past hour reviewing each incident, her voice steady and professional as she read aloud the accounts of employees who had been degraded, humiliated, and marginalized under Holloway's management. "Sarah Chen, Accounting Department." Amelia read from one of the reports. "States that you told her she was too emotional to handle important client meetings and suggested she might be more comfortable in a clerical role when she protested. You told her to know her place and threatened to write her up for insubordination." Holloway shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That's taken out of context. Sarah was having difficulty with the Morrison account, and I was trying to Marcus Thompson IT department," Amelia continued, ignoring his interruption. "Reports that you questioned his qualifications for a promotion, suggesting that diversity hires shouldn't expect special treatment. When he provided documentation of his certifications and performance reviews, you told him he was being too aggressive and making other employees uncomfortable." "I never said Jennifer Rodriguez." "Marketing?" Amelia's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the calm. "States that you made repeated comments about her accent, suggested she work on her English, and told her that clients might be more comfortable with someone who sounded more American." With each report, Holloway seemed to shrink further into his chair. The confident, commanding figure who had dominated the lobby just hours before had been replaced by a man who looked like he might be sick. "Should I continue?" Amelia asked, gesturing to the stack of remaining documents. "Because I have 17 more reports, just like these, spanning the past 6 months since you took over as regional manager." "Those people are disgruntled," said weakly. "They're trying to cause trouble to undermine my authority." "You can't believe everything." "I can believe what I saw with my own eyes," Amelia interrupted. "I can believe the way you spoke to me when you thought I was powerless to fight back. I can believe the pattern of behavior that these reports describe, because I witnessed it firsthand. She leaned forward, her dark eyes meeting his directly. Tell me, Mr. Holloway, what did you see when you looked at me in that lobby? What made you so certain that I was beneath you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Holloway's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Finally, he managed to whisper, I don't know what you mean. You don't know what I mean. Amelia's voice rose slightly, the first crack in her professional composure. You saw a black woman in a business suit, and you immediately assumed she was there to clean your floors. You saw someone who looked different from you, and you decided she must be inferior. You saw an opportunity to exert your power over someone you believed couldn't fight back. It wasn't about race, Holloway said quickly. I would have treated anyone the same way if they were wandering around during business hours looking like they didn't belong. Looking like they didn't belong, Amelia repeated, in my own building, in the company I built from nothing. What exactly did I look like that made you think I didn't belong? The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of an answer they both knew, but only one of them was brave enough to acknowledge. You know what the most damaging part of all this is? Amelia continued. It's not just the individual acts of disrespect or discrimination. It's the culture you've created. It's the message you've sent to every employee in this building that their worth is determined by your personal prejudices. She opened another file, this one containing performance metrics and employee satisfaction surveys. Since you became regional manager, we've seen a 23% increase in employee turnover in this office. Productivity is down 18%. We've lost 3 major clients who complained about the unprofessional atmosphere during meetings. The market has been challenging. The market has been challenging for everyone. Amelia cut him off. But our other regional offices have maintained their performance levels. Some have even exceeded expectations. The only common denominator here is your leadership. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city where she had built her dreams from nothing. I started this company 30 years ago, with nothing but an idea and a determination to prove that success isn't determined by what you look like or where you come from. I've spent 3 decades building a culture based on merit, respect, and dignity. Turning back to face him, she continued, and in 6 months, you've managed to poison everything I've worked to create. You've made employees afraid to speak up, afraid to excel, afraid to be themselves. You've created an environment where people are judged not by their abilities or their contributions, but by whether they fit your narrow definition of who deserves respect. I can change, Holloway said desperately. I can take sensitivity training, work with HR, whatever you want. Please, Ms. Washington, I need this job. I have a family, a mortgage. You should have thought about that before you decided to treat human beings like they were beneath you, Amelia replied. You should have considered the consequences before you created a workplace where people are valued based on the color of their skin or the sound of their names. She walked back to the table and gathered the files, her movements deliberate and final. Your employment with Sterling Industries is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out of the building, and you have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings under supervision. You can't do this, Holloway said, his voice rising with panic. I'll fight this. I'll sue for wrongful termination. You'll do nothing, Amelia said quietly, because every conversation in this building is recorded. Every interaction is documented, and every witness to your behavior is prepared to testify to what they've seen. You'll accept your termination gracefully, or you'll face the consequences of having your conduct exposed publicly. The fight went out of Holloway like air from a punctured balloon. He slumped in his chair, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. His career, his reputation, his future, all destroyed by the prejudices he had thought were safely hidden behind his position of power. I want you to understand something, Amelia said as she prepared to leave. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about making you pay for embarrassing me. This is about protecting every employee in this company from the kind of treatment you've normalized. This is about making sure that no one else has to endure what you've put people through. She paused at the door, looking back at the man who had shown her just how much work still needed to be done. I hope you learned something from this experience, Mr. Holloway. I hope you realize that true leadership isn't about making people feel small. It's about helping them reach their full potential, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. The emergency all-hands meeting was unlike anything the Sterling Industries Chicago office had ever experienced. The main conference room had been reconfigured to accommodate nearly 300 employees, with additional screens set up for those who couldn't fit in the space. Amelia stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding attention without her having to raise her voice. By now, most of you have heard about what happened in the lobby this morning, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. Some of you witnessed it firsthand, others have seen the videos that have been circulating. I want to address what happened, but more importantly, I want to talk about what we're going to do to ensure it never happens again. The room was silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward her with expressions ranging from curiosity to vindication to barely contained excitement. These were employees who had been living under Holloway's reign of intimidation for months, and the relief was palpable. First, let me be clear about something, Amelia continued. Richard Holloway is no longer employed by this company. His termination was immediate and final. But removing one person doesn't solve the systemic problems that allowed this situation to develop. She gestured to a presentation screen behind her, where the first slide showed employee satisfaction scores over the past year. These numbers tell a story that I should have been paying attention to months ago. They show a workplace where people felt unsafe, unwelcome, and undervalued. They show a culture that had become toxic, and that's on me. Marcus Thompson, the IT specialist, who had been mentioned in the HR reports, raised his hand. Ms. Washington, with respect, this isn't your fault. We tried to report these issues through proper channels, but nothing seemed to change. That's exactly the problem, Amelia replied. Our reporting systems failed you. Our HR department failed. You, our company leadership, failed you. And that stops today. She clicked to the next slide, which outlined a comprehensive plan for cultural reform. Effective immediately, we're implementing several changes. First, we're establishing an independent ombudsman program, where employees can report harassment and discrimination directly to a third-party organization that answers only to the board of directors. The room stirred with murmurs of approval, but Amelia wasn't finished. Second, we're conducting a company-wide audit of all management practices and policies. Every supervisor, every department head, every regional manager will undergo a comprehensive review of their leadership style and treatment of employees. Sarah Chen, the accountant, who had been told she was too emotional for client meetings, spoke up. What about the people who were passed over for promotions or given negative reviews because they didn't fit Holloway's preferences? Will those decisions be reviewed? Absolutely, Amelia said. Every performance review, every promotion decision, every disciplinary action taken in the past year will be examined by an independent committee. Where we find evidence of bias or discrimination, we'll take corrective action, including retroactive promotions and compensation adjustments. The energy in the room was shifting from cautious optimism to genuine excitement. These were employees who had been beaten down for months, who had been made to feel like their voices didn't matter, and now they were hearing that their experiences would be taken seriously. But I want to be clear about something else, Amelia continued, her tone becoming more serious. This isn't just about fixing what went wrong. This is about creating something better. It's about building a workplace where everyone feels valued, where diversity isn't just tolerated but celebrated, where success is measured by talent and dedication, not by whether you look like the person in charge. Jennifer Rodriguez, the marketing specialist who had been told to work on her English, raised her hand. Ms. Washington, how do we know these changes will stick? How do we know that once things calm down, we won't go back to the way things were? It was a fair question, and Amelia appreciated the courage it took to ask it. Because you're going to hold us accountable, she said. Because we're going to create systems that make it impossible for another Richard Holloway to operate in this company, and because I'm going to be personally involved in ensuring that these changes are real and lasting. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a new organizational structure. I'm also announcing the creation of a new position, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. This person will report directly to me and will have the authority to investigate complaints, implement policy changes, and ensure that every employee has an equal opportunity to succeed. The applause that followed was spontaneous and sustained, but Amelia raised her hand for quiet. "I want to share something personal with you," she said, her voice taking on a more intimate tone. "What happened to me today in the lobby isn't unique. It's happened to me throughout my career, in boardrooms and business meetings, at conferences and client dinners. People have looked at me and made assumptions about who I am and what I'm capable of." The room was completely silent now. Everyone focused on her words. "The difference is that I've been in a position of power that allowed me to fight back, to prove those assumptions wrong. But most of you don't have that luxury. Most of you have to endure disrespect and discrimination without recourse, because you need your jobs and you can't afford to make waves." She paused, her eyes scanning the faces in the room. "That ends today. Today, you have recourse. Today, you have a voice. Today, you have the full support of this company's leadership in demanding the respect and dignity that every human being deserves." The applause this time was thunderous, but Amelia wasn't finished. "I also want to address something that some of you might be thinking. This isn't about political correctness or diversity quotas or any of the other buzzwords that get thrown around. This is about basic human decency. This is about creating a workplace where people are judged by their abilities, their contributions, and their character, not by the color of their skin or the sound of their names." She clicked to the final slide, which showed the company's mission statement. Sterling Industries was built on the principle that excellence has no color, no gender, no accent, no background, that every person has the potential to contribute something valuable if given the opportunity. That success is measured by results, not by whether you fit someone's preconceived notions of what a leader should look like. The meeting continued for another hour, with employees sharing their experiences, asking questions, and offering suggestions for improvement. By the time it ended, the atmosphere in the office had completely transformed. These people were talking, openly laughing together, and beginning to envision a workplace where they could truly thrive. As the employees filed out of the conference room, many of them stopped to speak with Amelia personally. They thanked her for listening, for taking action, for showing them that their voices mattered. But it was Marcus Thompson who perhaps said it best, "Ms. Washington. Thank you for showing us that dignity isn't something we have to earn, something we all deserve." The video went viral within hours, shot on a smartphone by a Sterling Industries employee. It captured the moment when Amelia revealed her CEO badge to a stunned Richard Holloway, and by evening it had been viewed millions of times across social media platforms. The clip was accompanied by headlines like "Racist Manager Gets Instant Karma" and "CEO Poses as Cleaner to Expose Workplace Discrimination." But the real impact wasn't in the viral fame or the social media buzz. It was in the conversations that started happening in offices across the country, in boardrooms and break rooms, in diversity seminars and executive meetings. The incident had become a catalyst for a broader discussion about workplace culture, unconscious bias, and the responsibility of leadership to create inclusive environments. Amelia sat in her Chicago hotel room, scrolling through news articles and social media posts about the incident. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive, with business leaders and diversity advocates praising her response and calling for similar accountability in their own organizations. But she also saw the darker side of the conversation. The comments from people who defended Holloway, who claimed the incident was staged, or who argued that political correctness had gone too far. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed her assistant's name, Ms. Washington. The voice was excited, almost breathless. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. The phone hasn't stopped ringing. CNN wants an interview, 60 Minutes is calling, and Harvard Business School wants you to give a lecture on workplace diversity." "Slow down," Amelia said, though she couldn't help but smile. "What else?" "The Department of Labor wants to discuss using your new policies as a model for other companies. The NAACP wants to give you an award. And ... The assistant paused dramatically. Forbes wants to put you on the cover of their next issue. Amelia walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. What about the company? How are the employees? Handling all this attention, that's the best part, her assistant said. Morale is through the roof. People are volunteering to work overtime. Productivity is up, and we've received over 100 applications for jobs in the Chicago office. Alone? People want to work for a company that stands up for its values. But it wasn't just about Sterling Industries. In the days following the incident, other companies began announcing their own diversity initiatives. Some were genuine efforts to address long-standing problems. Others were clearly motivated by public relations concerns. But all of them represented a shift in how businesses thought about workplace culture. The story also reached beyond the corporate world. Schools began using the incident as a teaching tool, discussing unconscious bias and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. Community organizations held forums on workplace discrimination. Church groups and civic clubs organized discussions about how to create more inclusive environments. Dr. Patricia Williams, a professor of organizational psychology at Northwestern University, reached out to Amelia directly. What you did, she said during their phone conversation, was more than just firing a bad manager. You demonstrated something that research has been trying to prove for years, that diverse, inclusive workplaces aren't just morally right, they're more productive, more innovative, and more profitable. I didn't set out to make a statement, Amelia replied. I just wanted to understand what was happening in my own company. But that's exactly the point, Dr. Williams said. You didn't just issue a memo or send everyone to sensitivity training. You experienced the problem firsthand, and then you took meaningful action to address it. That's the kind of leadership that creates real change. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on Amelia's hotel room door. She opened it to find Kevin, Holloway's former assistant, standing in the hallway looking nervous and uncertain. Ms. Washington, he said. I hope you don't mind me coming by. I wanted to talk to you about something. She invited him in, curious about what he might have to say. Kevin had been present during the lobby confrontation, had witnessed his boss's behavior firsthand, but hadn't spoken up at the time. I need to apologize, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I knew what Mr. Holloway was doing was wrong. I saw him treat people badly, heard him make comments that made me uncomfortable, but I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid I'd lose my job. Amelia gestured for him to sit down. Kevin, right? You're not responsible for your boss's actions. But I am responsible for my own, he replied. I could have said something. I could have tried to stop him when he was talking to you in the lobby. I recognized you the moment you walked in, but I was too scared to intervene. Fear is a powerful thing, Amelia said gently. It's what allows people like Holloway to operate. They create environments where speaking up feels impossible, where people are afraid to do the right thing because they might face retaliation. Kevin looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and determination. I want to do better. I want to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Is there still a place for me at Sterling Industries? It was a question that got to the heart of what Amelia was trying to accomplish. How do you move forward when some people were complicit in creating the toxic culture? How do you balance accountability with redemption? Tell me about the other employees, she said. What did you observe about how they were treated? For the next hour, Kevin provided a detailed account of the workplace dynamics under Holloway's leadership. He described the fear that permeated the office, the way employees would avoid certain meetings or interactions, the informal networks that people created to protect themselves from their manager's wrath. There was this unspoken rule, Kevin explained, don't be too successful, don't stand out, don't give him a reason to notice you. People would actually downplay their achievements to avoid drawing attention. And you saw this happening, but didn't report it. Kevin nodded miserably. I told myself I was just an assistant, that it wasn't my place to question management decisions. I convinced myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe this was just how business worked. But you knew better, Amelia said. It wasn't a question. I knew better, he confirmed. And I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can do better. Amelia studied the young man sitting across from her. She could see the genuine remorse in his eyes, the desire to make amends for his passive participation in a toxic system. But she also knew that trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild. "Here's what I'm going to do," she said finally. "I'm going to give you an opportunity to prove that you're serious about change. You're going to work directly with our new Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. You're going to help us understand exactly how the toxic culture operated, who was affected, and what we need to do to fix it." Kevin's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Ms. Washington. I won't let you down." "Don't thank me yet," Amelia said. "This isn't going to be easy. You're going to have to confront some uncomfortable truths about your own role in what happened. You're going to have to make amends to colleagues who may not be ready to forgive you. And you're going to have to prove, through your actions, that you're committed to creating a better workplace." As Kevin left her hotel room, Amelia reflected on the complexity of the situation she was trying to address. It wasn't just about removing bad actors like Holloway. It was about transforming a culture that had allowed such behavior to flourish. And that meant working with people who had been complicit, people who had been afraid to speak up, people who had been damaged by the toxic environment. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her head of HR. "The story is spreading internationally. We're getting calls from companies in Europe, Asia, and South America asking for advice on implementing similar policies. This is becoming something much bigger than just our company." Amelia smiled, thinking about the ripple effects that were continuing to spread outward from a single moment of confrontation in a marble lobby. She had set out to address a problem in one office, but she had inadvertently sparked a global conversation about dignity, respect, and the responsibility of leadership to create inclusive environments. The next morning, she would fly back to the corporate headquarters to begin implementing the changes she had promised. There would be resistance, there would be challenges, and there would be people who questioned whether such dramatic reforms were necessary. But she had seen the faces of the employees in that conference room, had felt their relief and hope, and she knew that this was just the beginning of a transformation that would define the future of Sterling Industries. 6 months later, Amelia stood in the same marble lobby where her confrontation with Richard Holloway had taken place, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. The space buzzed with energy and conversation. Employees from different departments collaborating on projects, sharing ideas, and clearly comfortable in their environment. The transformation had been neither quick nor easy. Implementing the changes she had promised required dismantling systems and policies that had been in place for years, challenging attitudes that were deeply ingrained, and rebuilding trust that had been systematically eroded. But the results were undeniable. Satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs, turnover had dropped by 60%, productivity was up across all departments. The Chicago office had not only recovered the clients they had lost under Holloway's management, but had signed several new major accounts. Most importantly, the culture had shifted from one of fear and intimidation to one of collaboration and mutual respect. "Ms. Washington," a voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Sarah Chen, the accountant who had been told she was too emotional for client meetings. But Sarah looked different, now confident, energized, and wearing a name tag that read Senior Account Manager. "Sarah," Amelia smiled. "How are you settling into your new role?" "It's been incredible," Sarah replied. "I just closed the Morrison account. You know, the one Mr. Holloway said I wasn't qualified to handle? It's now our second largest client relationship." It was exactly the kind of success story that Amelia had hoped to create. Sarah had been promoted as part of the comprehensive review of personnel decisions, and she had thrived in an environment where her abilities were recognized and supported. "And how are you finding the new management structure?" Amelia asked. "It's like working for a completely different company," Sarah said. "Our new regional manager actually listens to our ideas. She encourages us to take on challenges, to grow. Professionally, it's what I always hoped work could be like." The new regional manager was Dr. Patricia Williams, the organizational psychology professor who had reached out to Amelia after the incident. She had been recruited specifically to help rebuild the Chicago office culture, and her approach was the complete opposite of Holloway's authoritarian style. Have you seen the latest numbers? Dr. Williams asked, joining their conversation. Not just meeting our targets, we're exceeding them. And the employee engagement scores are off the charts. What do you think made the difference? Amelia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. People perform better when they feel valued, Dr. Williams replied. When they know their contributions matter, when they're not spending energy protecting themselves from their own management, when they can focus on doing their best work instead of just surviving. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus Thompson, the IT specialist who had been told he was being too aggressive in pursuing promotions. He was practically glowing with excitement. "Ms. Washington, I wanted to thank you personally," he said. "I just got confirmation that my proposal for the new network security system has been approved. It's going to be implemented across all our offices nationwide." "That's fantastic, Marcus," Amelia said. "Tell me about the project," as Marcus enthusiastically explained his innovative approach to cybersecurity. Amelia reflected on how many brilliant ideas had probably been suppressed under the previous management. How many Marcus Thompsons had been silenced? How many Sarah Chens had been sidelined? How many employees had never reached their full potential because they were too busy navigating a hostile work environment? "There's something else," Marcus continued. "The proposal is being presented at the National Cybersecurity Conference next month. They want me to give a keynote presentation about innovative approaches to corporate data protection." It was a remarkable transformation. 6 months ago, Marcus had been told he was making other employees uncomfortable by advocating for himself. Now he was being recognized as a thought leader in his field. "I'm proud of you," Amelia said, "but I want you to remember something. This success isn't because of me or the policy changes we've implemented. This is because of your talent, your dedication, and your refusal to give up even when the system was working against you." Jennifer Rodriguez approached their group, carrying a portfolio of marketing materials. "Ms. Washington, I wanted to show you the new diversity recruitment campaign we've developed. It's going to run in major publications nationwide." The campaign was brilliant, a series of images and testimonials from Sterling Industries employees of all backgrounds, ethnicities, and roles, with the tagline, "Excellence has no color, no gender, no accent, no limits." But it was more than just marketing. It was a statement of values that would attract talent from communities that had previously been overlooked. "This is going to change how people think about our company," Jennifer said. "We're already seeing an increase in applications from diverse candidates who want to work somewhere that values their contributions. And the best part," Dr. Williams added, "is that it's authentic. We're not just talking about diversity and inclusion, we're living it. People can see the difference in how we operate, how we treat employees, how we make decisions." As the day continued, Amelia met with dozens of employees who shared their stories of transformation. Kevin, Holloway's former assistant, had become a key advocate for the new policies, working with the diversity and inclusion team to identify and address systemic issues. The security guard, who had been put in the awkward position of potentially escorting the CEO out of her own building, had been promoted to head of security and had implemented new training protocols for all security personnel. But perhaps the most significant change was in the leadership pipeline. The company had identified and begun developing a new generation of managers who understood that true leadership meant empowering others, not diminishing them. These were people who had been overlooked under the previous system, but who possessed the emotional intelligence and vision necessary to create inclusive, high-performing teams. "You know what amazes me most?" Dr. Williams said as they concluded their tours of the office. "It's not just that we've eliminated the toxic behaviors. It's that we've created something genuinely positive. People are excited to come to work. They're collaborating across departments. They're taking risks and innovating because they know their ideas will be heard and valued." "That was always the goal," Amelia replied. "Not just to stop bad behavior, but to create an environment where everyone could thrive." As she prepared to leave Chicago, Amelia received a text message that made her smile. It was from an employee at their London office. "Saw the video of your confrontation with that manager. Inspired me to speak up about similar issues here. Management listened, and we're implementing changes. Thank you for showing us that our voices matter. Similar messages had been arriving for months, from Sterling Industries employees around the world, and from people at other companies who had been inspired by the story. The incident in the lobby had become a catalyst for change that extended far beyond the walls of any single building. But as Amelia looked back at the bustling lobby one last time, she knew that the real legacy wasn't in the viral videos or the news coverage or the business school case studies that would inevitably be written about the incident. The real legacy was in the faces of the employees who no longer walked through those doors with fear or resignation. But with pride and purpose, the real legacy was in the knowledge that dignity and respect weren't privileges to be rationed based on someone's prejudices, but rights that belong to every human being. The real legacy was in the proof that companies could be both profitable and principled, that success didn't require sacrificing humanity, and that true leadership meant lifting others up, not keeping them down. As she walked out of the building, Amelia thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a young woman fighting for respect in male-dominated boardrooms to a CEO who had learned that success meant nothing if it didn't include everyone. The confrontation with Richard Holloway had been painful and infuriating, but it had also been necessary, a mirror that forced her to confront the inequities that had existed under her leadership, and a catalyst that enabled her to create something better. The badge that had revealed her identity that day was still clipped to her jacket, but now it meant something different. It wasn't just a symbol of her authority or her achievements. It was a reminder of her responsibility to use her position to create opportunities for others, to ensure that every employee could wear their own badge of dignity and respect. The story that had begun with a racist manager's assumptions about a black woman's place in the world had become something larger. Testament to the power of standing up for what's right, the importance of creating inclusive environments, and the truth that excellence truly has no color, no gender, no accent, and no limits. In the end, that was the legacy Amelia Washington wanted to leave behind. Not just a successful company, but a better world where everyone could walk into any room, any building, any workplace, and know that they belonged.